I'm going to make a video today about the problem that I have, and indeed many people have, with the binding in DC omnibuses. So this is a DC omnibus. This is the Justice League International omnibus. It's a fairly recent one. I believe it came out last summer. And this is a Marvel omnibus. This is I believe it's 2012 printing of the Ultimate Spider-Man omnibus. Excellent book, by the way. Totally recommend both of these series. But as you can see here, when I open the spine, we have, or if I open the cover, we have the outer spine and the inner spine as two separate pieces, and they separate immediately, creating an eye. And as a result of this, I can open just a few pages. This is issue 1, this is the beginning of issue 1, and the book stays open, which is excellent. That's what you want in an omnibus. It's not a problem. I can open it, stays open, no gutter loss at all. I can see everything that's going on because it has very well done sewn binding. You can see that that arc doesn't hurt anything. I've had this for many years, and I've read it a multitude of times, and it's an excellent book, and it's well constructed. I don't have any problem reading it. I open it to about the halfway point. You can see the trend continues. Very well done sewn binding. Now, the problem is with the DC Omnibus. So if I move that over here, I open the cover, you can see we get the eye. Much better than the old DC Omnibus in terms of one's ability to open the book and not receive gutter loss. But you can see it doesn't stay open very well. You can hear like a papery sound, which is not a good sound to hear in an omnibus. You have to wait till you're a fairly significant way into the book before it stays open on its own, consistently. But regardless, that's not too big a deal. You know, it can be dealt with. The problem lies in this. You see how shaky and inconsistent this is? This stitching here, this ribbon. Now, when I open the book further, you can see a great deal of buckling. You can see the cardboard has begun to separate from the ribbon, and indeed the ribbon has begun to separate from the paper itself, which is obviously terrible. That's tremendously bad for a book of this scale, and indeed for any book. I'll lower you in there a little bit more and adjust the light. You can see just how much of a problem this is. A significant amount of the ribbon has completely separated from the paper. And I'm only on the 6th issue in this collection. I've not had this a terribly long time. This is my first time reading through it in omnibus form. And I'm on issue 6, which is in this case annual number 1. And already, I'm experiencing a great deal of trouble with this spine, with this binding. And so I'll do a video on how to fix that. But I wanted to, because this is, like, these books are a significant amount of money. What I wanted to do is sort of point out these problems and sort of talk about them a little bit so that buyers of omnibuses will be more informed in the future, so that they don't make a bad purchase decision and end up getting a book that will eventually fall apart, or rather quickly fall apart, as the case is here. Yeah, so it's basically just connected by this piece of paper here and in the back. If I flip it around, you can see that there is the same problem present on this side, and see that it's barely held on there, the paper, which is unfortunate because it does use stitching. It uses sewn binding as opposed to older DC omnibuses, which only used glued binding. which is a big no-no for books this size. But yeah, I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So be informed. If you go for omnibuses, unless you want to, unless you really, really want a collection like this, this is a series that's very important to me. Unless you really want a series from DC Comics, I'd recommend getting it in trade, getting it in hardcover, getting it in whatever edition you need, but avoid, like the plague, these omnibuses, because it's been my experience that DC omnibuses have terrible binding, and indeed binding that comes apart without much strain. I'd recommend the Marvel omnibuses for omnibus collectors, the more popular choice for, I believe, a plethora of reasons, one of which being simply the binding is far superior. The DC binding is clearly the suboptimal way of doing things because of the way it simply falls apart. But yeah, Marvel stories you can absolutely read in omnibus form and have no problem. In fact, I recommend collecting miniseries in omnibus form if you're a Marvel reader. But do avoid the DC omnibuses if you're into DC Comics. I would go for the absolute editions in some cases. I've never heard a complaint about those. I would go for the hardcovers, which are in fact glued binding, but they're actually it's not a problem when you have something as small as 6 issues or so. Or the trade paperbacks, the large collections of trade paperbacks. They tend to be fairly cheap because they're printed on older papers, pulp paper, if you will, and just stuff like that. Do not get the omnibuses unless you really want a series. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.